Hello and welcome to Mary Makes. I'm Mary and today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 tips and tricks for working with size 7 jumbo chenille yarn. Really quick before we dive in, I just want to go over yarn thickness with you in case you're new to this. Yarn is generally rated on a scale of 1 to 7, with 1 being the thinnest lace like thread crochet, and 7 being jumbo. Jumbo is kind of a catch-all category because I've seen like really thick, chunky arm knitting kind of stuff put into the jumbo category, as well as the yarn we're looking at today, which is about yay thick. You can see this compared to my finger. So jumbo is kind of a catch-all. As far as the types of jumbo yarn I use, the 3 brands I use most are Chenille Home and Sweet Snuggles. Both of these yarns are available at Michael's. Just really quick, at Michael's, they also sell Sweet Snuggles Light and a light version of Chenille Home. I forgot what it's called though. That is actually a size 5 bulky yarn, so it's thinner. If you are looking for size 7 jumbo yarn, just make sure that when you're purchasing yarn, it has this size 7 jumbo here, and it says Sweet Snuggles instead of Sweet Snuggles Light. The other brand of jumbo chenille that I use is Parfait XL. This yarn is available online at Premier Yarn's website. I love this. They have a bunch of different colors that Michael's doesn't have. So I'd check them out. In the description is my referral code for 10% off your first purchase if you would like to purchase some Parfait XL from Premier Yarns. So with all that said, let's dive into my top 5 tips and tricks. So number 1, we're going to be looking at making the magic ring or magic circle, if you prefer, using chenille yarn. Let's go to the overhead camera. So when you're making the magic ring, what I see happen a lot with folks who are new to this type of yarn is they end up frustrated, or they like end up snapping the yarn because they couldn't pull it hard enough to close the ring. So I'm going to show you 2 things that you can do when you're making the magic ring. So first, I'm going to form the magic ring. I take the dead end in my left hand and I wrap the live end on top so that it makes an X like this. Then I take my yarn hook, insert it into the hole, grab my yarn, twist and pull my yarn up towards the ceiling, and then yarn over and pull through. And this created the slip knot, the adjustable slip knot for this magic ring. And you'll notice that this tail end is twisted. I definitely recommend untwisting this tail. And then before you make your magic ring, check that your ring is actually adjustable before you start putting stitches into it. So you can see here that I can definitely pull on my circle here and adjust it. So I guess that's the first thing, is if your ring isn't adjustable to begin with, it's not going to adjust once you put stitches in it. So let me go ahead and put 6 single crochet into this magic ring now and close it off. I'm going to show you the second thing that you can do if you still accidentally snap your yarn. That was 5 stitches. Here's the 6th one. So because I made sure my magic ring was still adjustable, I'm not going to have any issues. I'm going to be able to close my magic ring just fine. And there it is. You can see my 6 stitches here. Now, let's say we do break our yarn. I'm going to intentionally pull my yarn so that it snaps. Ugh. There we go. Let's say we break and we're like, oh no, my magic ring is falling apart. I can already fit my finger through it. So if that happens to you, don't worry. What I recommend for fixing your magic ring, and if you're like just getting really frustrated, is to cut yourself a length of regular worsted weight yarn. This is just a ball. This yarn here I'm holding is just from a ball of Red Heart with Love yarn, and you don't need very much yarn. What we're going to do is we're just going to take our yarn needle, thread it, and use this like same color yarn to sew into the magic ring. We're just gonna replace the adjustable slip knot that we broke with a new one. And all I'm doing is going through each stitch and making sure that my yarn is in it. I like to go through twice, but I don't think that's necessarily a hard and fast rule. But there it is. I've gone through all of my stitches with my regular size 4 worsted weight yarn. And now I'm just going to tie a knot. And boom. There it is. Now you can leave your yarn ends inside or you can tuck them in, but usually there's no need. If you're making a plushie, all of this will end up inside the plushie anyways. But there it is. That's how you can make and break the magic yarn or the magic ring and fix it using regular yarn. All right, on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to gently stretch out your chenille yarn so that you can avoid the doming shape. And I'm going to show you what I mean here. So with this red piece that I just started with the magic ring, do you see how it's cupping? Like I just made it and I'm just using multiples of 6. So round 1, 6 stitches, round 2, 12, round 3, 18, round 4, 24 stitches. Do you see how it's cupping here? When you have chenille yarn that's cupping, if you leave it in this shape here where it's got like kind of a point at the top, by the time you finish whatever you're making, it's gonna have like a peak to it. And usually that's like undesirable. Like if I were making a dinosaur or a mushroom or something else, I'd want the top to be a nice curve. So what you should do to avoid that point is to stretch out your piece. And you're not like stretching it and ripping it apart. You're just gently tugging at it so that the stitches settle and so that your piece lays flat. Because when you crochet with like regular worsted weight yarn in multiples of 6s, it naturally sits flat. And for some reason with chenille yarn, when you crochet with multiples of 6s, it doesn't naturally sit flat. So all I do is I just like gently go around and I tug each of the sides of the hexagon, so to speak, until it's flat like this. So I'm going to do that really quickly with this red one. And you'll see like the stitches are kind of settling into place too. And then it will lie flat, and then whatever I make with this red circle will not have a point to it because now it's laying flat instead of being a dome. This is a really common mistake I see, or just, I wouldn't call it a mistake necessarily, but just a technique I see that's not used is folks aren't stretching out their chenille yarn. So whenever they make their plushies, whatever they're making, their piece has like a pointy head. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is to not overwork your yarn. So in the previous example, I just used this light blue yarn, or this just blue yarn. And because I worked with it twice, you can already see here that some fluff has like moved on. It hasn't come out. I don't have any of the blue fluff on my table, but what it's done is it's shifted. With chenille yarn, let me show you this. If you pull some of the fluff on your end off, chenille yarn actually has these 2 like white strands in it, and it's holding together all this fluff. If you are working with your yarn too much, that fluff will shift around. So you can see right here, I'm just like dragging this little clump of fluff from side to side, and you can see this gap in the yarn just like moving because I've bunched the fluff up together. And so I guess that's all to say is just be careful when you're working with chenille yarn. Be intentional with your stitches, otherwise you're going to get sections where your chenille fluff has bunched up, and you're gonna get sections of yarn where there's nothing on it like that. So that is tip number 3. Tip number 4 is to use felt to back your eyes when you're using these like safety eyes, so to speak, in making your plushies. Because the stitches you're making are so big, like I'm not going to just stab my finger through this, but you can see my pinky poking through this plushie I'm making. So like if I were to put this back right onto this eyeball, there's a risk that this back could just come through. So it's not the risk, oops, it's not the risk of the back like falling off of the eye, it's the risk that the eye and the back piece completely comes through the plushie. So just picking up my eye. So what I do with these safety eyes is I insert the eye, then I get a little felt square. I've also cut like a tiny little hole in the felt square, and then I put the square onto my eyeball, just like that. And then I take my eye back and then insert it. So this felt square dramatically decreases the likelihood that the entire eyeball and back piece just comes out. So now we're left with the risk that the back pops up. So if you've purchased these eyes before, I buy them off Amazon. They're like pretty good quality, but sometimes they don't, they're like the eye backs don't perfectly fit the eye pieces. Gosh, I wish I had better names for these. So what I do now is I take a lighter and I melt the back post like this. And this way it makes like a stopper. So I'll show you what I'm doing. Just be careful when you're playing with fire. And I didn't melt that enough. I'm gonna melt this a little more. I'm just using the lighter to hold the flame against the end of the eye, and now I've like melted it and used the side of the lighter to push the plastic down. So now that the plastic is this stubby shape, this back piece will never fall off of it. It can't because it's clamped down. So that's tip number 4, is how to use felt squares to keep your safety eyes secure in your plushies. And finally, tip number 5. Tip number 5 is to use acrylic yarn when sewing on parts onto your jumbo plushies. So I'm going to do my best to try to show you it on a completed plushie, but basically what I do, especially when I'm making my dinosaurs that I sell in my shop, is I make each of the parts separately, and then I don't use chenille yarn to sew my parts together. I use regular like acrylic worsted weight yarn, like Red Heart, Super Saver, like that kind of yarn to sew parts on. This is because, one, chenille yarn just like breaks easily. You saw how easily I broke the chenille yarn when I did the magic ring in tip number 1. And then 2, it's because when you're using acrylic yarn to sew it in, you like literally can't see it. So I used acrylic yarn to sew in the arms and the tail and the legs on this plushie, and you really cannot see the acrylic yarn. But because I used like regular yarn instead of chenille yarn to sew, it's more secure. Like I would be totally confident that if a kid running around holding this dinosaur by this arm, like I'd be totally confident the arm would not rip off. So it's more secure, and it also saves you a little bit of material cost because you're not like using your expensive chenille yarn. You know, like this stuff is like 10 bucks a ball, and it's only like what, 100 meters, give or take. Whereas you can buy like, I don't know, 300 grams of this acrylic worsted weight yarn for like, I don't know, $4. So that's pro tip number 5, is to use regular acrylic worsted weight yarn when you're sewing on parts with parts made from jumbo chenille. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Those are my top 5 tips and tricks for working with jumbo chenille yarn. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other helpful tips and tricks you want to share with us, and like and subscribe for more crochet content. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.